Well, ladies and gentlemen, Michael, John, Rod Kemp, Senator Ryan, thank you very much indeed for having me here tonight. It's a fantastic honour, and it's so kind of you to come out here. I can only consider it's because of the kind of sexy profile that John Roscombe and Michael Kroger present that has attracted everybody. I'm only going to speak for a few moments. I just really want to thank the IPA, and I also feel, where would we be without John Roscombe? Where would we be without Michael Kroger? I mean, we lack ideological warriors in this country. People just go along with the zeitgeist and the atmosphere, and John and Michael are magnificent ideological warriors. I don't know how Michael and I got through university without meeting each other, really. The astonishing thing is not the people that you meet in life, but somehow that you manage not to meet a few people. I just want to make a couple of remarks tonight, but I want to just say a few thank yous first. First of all, the most important thank you is to my wife, JC. Bloke shouldn't talk too much about his wife in public, although I have to, as some of you who've heard my presentations before will know, she figures quite a lot in my presentations, especially when she's not there. But I would just say, in all honesty, when I thank God for his tender mercies every night, JC is chief amongst them. And having said that, I'd instruct any of you who find anything in this book offensive, foolish, ridiculous, overstated or absurd to approach JC. She will deal with you very definitively. I'm very proud to have two of my sons here, Jagdev and Lakvinda, and I think somewhere my daughter-in-law, is she here? No, she's not here tonight, God bless her. She was at the other launch the other day, and really, how much can a daughter-in-law take, really? But I also want to thank my other son, RJ, who can't be here because he's working. He sent his wife and her nephew to the launch in Sydney, and I'm so proud of him and all my sons and my three grandchildren, Mani and Tatiana, and my grandson, I want to tell you, is Manisha, and Tatiana, and my grandson, I want to tell you, his name is Gregory Jr. and he's here. He is a fine young man. I don't know if he's going to be the foreign editor of The Australian. He looks like he'll be a prop forward for the Bulldogs in the NRL at this stage. I also want to thank my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Raj and Amy, for coming tonight. You couldn't have better sister-in-law and brother-in-law than them. I just want to make a couple of remarks about the book before we switch to discussion mode. I had a few ambitions in writing this book. One was to fix a certain time and place in print, to try to capture the sense of a time and place. The past is a foreign country, so you can think of this as travel writing in a way. I wanted to argue a world view. I wanted to put the ideas which Michael and John have outlined so eloquently. Part of that worldview is a religious worldview, as is abundantly obvious. I'm a Mick, a bog trotter, a harp, whatever you want to call us. But my family, my wife and sons are Sikhs, so we get a lot of communications through to heaven. He gets a lot of lines are used, but I'm of an age where I remember the old Australian secular settlement, which was basically that we Catholics and Protestants would not argue with each other all the time, so we'd shut up a bit about religion and just go privately with it. Now, I respected that settlement for a very long time, but I now think the culture is so aggressively secular, so hostile to the Judeo-Christian tradition of Western society in every respect, that I think it is better for me, if I do have a religious belief, to just talk about it. I'm not a professional God-botherer. I don't talk about it every time I open my mouth, but when it's relevant, I talk about it. And it was certainly relevant to my view of the world, my view of politics. The church, along with a great slab of humanity, was being persecuted in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe and China and other communist societies in Asia, and that certainly pressed on our consciousness when we were young. I did also want to provide a little slice of history of the struggles of the Cold War, and part of the theme of this book is that all the people who came to maturity in this book apart from the people on the cover, you know, people like Peter Costello and Michael, of course, and Michael Eason and Michael Danby, a lot of figures in the Labor Party, had their values and ideas shaped by the Cold War and its struggles. And although we're glad that the Cold War is over, we're no longer threatened with Soviet nuclear annihilation, nonetheless, the Cold War served a purpose for Western societies in defining our values and making us come to grips with existential questions. What did we live for? What was our society for? Did we believe in anything? Did we believe in anything enough to fight for it? How could we respond to the threat of a more brutal, more aggressive, more barbaric international system which seemed to be full of energy? And although it now looks inevitable that we would win the Cold War, it wasn't inevitable at the time. And there are a lot of very fine books by great scholars with titles like The Suicide of the West, How Democracies Perish, and so on. It was a near-run thing, and the three great figures who changed it, of course, were Ronald Reagan, Pope John Paul II, and Lech Walesa, who really pivoted the world at that time. However, and of course the other ambition was hopefully to give you all a smile. Now I can guarantee if you read this book, you will either laugh or go to sleep. And both consequences are very therapeutic. So you don't get your money back if it bores you to sleep. I do want to alert you though, as Michael remarked, it is in parts a very personal book, and there are some very sensitive and dark issues that are explored, and I want to alert you to one in advance so that it's not too shocking if you come upon it. And I should have really had it in a sealed section. There is a very dark passage where, as an innocent young man, I am picked up at my parents' home in Forestville, and I am trapped in a machine, an 8-cylinder purple Leyland P76. For 12 hours as we drove from Sydney to Melbourne. And indeed, the whole book, in a sense, is like the road to Jerusalem, the road to Melbourne. You know, I start off in Sydney, but where am I today? And I suffered a species of Stockholm syndrome in this 12-hour journey because I eventually bought the Leyland P76 from its owner, who is now our Prime Minister. And when the journey began, I looked at the big box between the two front seats, and there were about 20 or 30 cassette tapes there, and I thought, oh, well, that's good, we'll have a good variety of music on the way down from Sydney to Melbourne. And this is the most terrible thing I can tell you about our Prime Minister, every single cassette tape there was Glenn Campbell. There was Glenn Campbell sings country, Glenn Campbell sings country and western, Glenn Campbell Gold, Glenn Campbell's greatest hits, Glenn Campbell, simply titled. It really has deformed my personality and warped my psyche, this terrible aversion therapy that I had for 12 hours. Still the lyrics of Galveston, oh Galveston, ring through my head. I have a kind of existential crisis over the Wichita lineman. Why would anyone write a song about a Wichita lineman? I am a lineman from the county and I work the main road. These lyrics reverberate through my head. I can tell you that I need a small vacation, but it don't look like rain. Do you have any idea what those words mean? Does anyone have any idea what those words mean? This is the riddle at the heart of the universe. This is the existential dilemma. And you know, the Prime Minister will have to answer to his maker for some of these things that he subjected me to. Of course, friendship with the Prime Minister was a great thing, and I do think he is a very fine human being, which doesn't mean that I don't criticise him when I think he gets things wrong. Michael referred to my writing a bit too much about Bob Carr, but I have to tell you, the Bob Carr I was writing about then, although let me say I've remained very good friends with Bob Carr despite disagreeing with him about the Middle East, although one bizarre typographical error remains in the book. At the end of the book I say I've remained very good friends with Bob Carr despite a disagreement about the Middle East, especially what I consider to be his excessive hostility to Israel. Clearly a Bolshevik typesetter has changed that to excessive hospitality towards Israel. I think it's important that we sell this book into a second edition, just so that I can correct that. But I do want to tell you, the Bob Carr that I mainly write about was the Bob Carr who founded Labour Friends of Israel, and who introduced me to Simcha Dinitz, and who was a tremendously strong supporter within the Labor Party of Israel in those days. People change. He stayed in Sydney, I came to Melbourne. There is a great deal of Melbourne in this book. Wonderful Melbourne figures. It's a joy to have Sue Knoffelmarker and Andrew Knoffelmarker with us tonight. The only conversation in the whole book which I had no hesitation in writing without any research or any reflection or trying to confirm it with anyone else was when Michael Danby took me to Gardenvale to meet Franta, and the conversation was so hilarious that it remains absolutely etched in my brain ever since. Franta, of course, knowing that I was associated with the NCC, told me, "You know, I understand what you NCC people are like. You are half choir boy, half altar boy, and half ruthless gangster." And he also told me of the difficulty that Catholic political action presented, because he said, Catholics don't care about you when you're alive. Before you're born, they're very concerned with your welfare. When you're about to die, they resume their interest in you. They want to extend the suffering as long as possible. And after you are dead, he said, they pray for you, which is a form of tacit aggression. And on it went. This was just a joy beyond measure, really, to converse with Franta. Other great Melbourne figures obviously figure very heavily in the book. Bob Santamaria. Now, I don't know if this audience is going to appreciate this anecdote, but Bob told me at the time that Malcolm Fraser offered him a knighthood, and he said to me, "Boy," he called a lot of us boy, he said, "Boy, I've done a lot of humiliating things for the sake of politics, but I'm not going to make myself a complete fool." So, of course, he rejected the knighthood out of hand without making it public. The great Sam Lipsky, of course, who was really a great mentor to me in journalism, and really inspired me to go into journalism. I saw Sam interviewing Moshe Dayan on the TV when I was a school kid, and I thought, well, it's pretty unlikely that I'm going to be a bald-headed, one-eyed Israeli general who's just commanded a war against the assembled Arab might and won. But I do have a chance of doing something like that other guy who's sitting across from him and talking to him with such urbanity. And, you know, showing our eventual common sense. Nearly a decade ago, my wife and family and I made Aliyah to Melbourne. And, you know, we've made our choice clear. So, again, thank you to John so much. Thank you to Michael, and thanks to everyone here.